On this In Tune to Nature show, this is Carrie Freeman, and I am happy to do part two of my series where I bring you along with me on my recent journey in June of 2025 to Tasmania, Australia. And in this part two, we are focusing on Maria Island and specifically talking a lot about wombats and wallabies and kangaroos, so the whole marsupial scene there.
Love you.
And then also going into the main city of Hobart for my conference on communication and environment, and especially finding out some environmental activists and their advice, Bob Brown and Christine Milne of the Green Party.
Let me tell you though, I learned when I came out of jail and next day went into Parliament. Jail's a far friendlier place.
Urgency, and this is something I feel very strongly about. I am sick to death of incrementalism. I'm sick to death of small steps. We know we are in the midst of an extinction crisis. Why are we sitting around pretending that we have time for incremental change? We don't. We need system change now, and so urgent.
And everything you hear on the recordings is just stuff that I have actually recorded myself. So you can tell how low tech it is, but I hope you appreciate the authenticity of it just using my smartphone around Australia. And also, the animals that I encounter are all wild. None of them are in captivity. I didn't go to any captivity facilities. And wanted to also tell you that as part of my compensation for the resources used and the greenhouse gases emitted from my international trip, I made some donations to the Tasmanian Land Conservancy, the Aboriginal Land Council of Tasmania, and the Friends of Bonorong Wildlife Sanctuary. So I hope you enjoyed this second portion of my Tasmania trip. And when I'm talking about photos, you can go to the Facebook page for In Tune to Nature. That's where you can see the photos and the videos of everyone that goes with the audio. Sit back and enjoy my unscientific, amateur, American eco-tourist views on Australia. I'm off my boat tour from Tasmania National Park, and now I'm in Coles Bay, just outside the park, and I found a place to get a vegan pizza at this little restaurant called Geography. They happen to have vegan cheese, which is awesome. And so now me and some of the other tourists are watching the ravens and like a seagull go for the leftovers on someone's table after they left with the outdoor dining. And there's also some little kind of sparrow type bird, but he's probably not brave enough to get up there with the bigger birds. But they're kind of diving around here, they're very cheeky and kind of waiting at the restaurants. I've heard with these ravens also that some of them know how to unzip your bag and try to get stuff out. And there was also this forest raven that when I was at Cradle Mountain National Park, when I got back in my car, and I had done a long walk, and then there was chips in the car, so I started eating these chips, and then this raven comes and lands right on my side mirror as if he knew I was eating the chips, even though the windows were rolled up, and he was basically staring at me. I mean, I didn't give him any chips because you shouldn't be feeding wildlife, but I thought how cheeky that he actually just flew over and landed on my car, and it wasn't scared at all, and literally wanted me to open the window and give him some chips. So I feel like these raven and crow type birds all over the world are some of the smartest and most assertive birds who aren't afraid to kind of hang around with humans and kind of work with us or try to take things from us. Seagulls are also like that. They can be they can kind of swoop down and get your chips when you're on the beach and stuff. So some of these birds are really opportunistic, and honestly, I am kind of impressed by that. Okay, so then on Sunday, I left Swansea and I drove south along the coast to Triabuna to go to Maria Island National Park. And also, it's so hard not to, well, I did stop at like a lot of the beaches as lookout points, and they would be gorgeous, amazing, and again, hardly anyone or often no one there. So but I couldn't really linger because I had to catch a ferry. So then I get to Triabuna, figure out where I'm not illegally parking, show my ticket. Luckily, I bought it ahead of time because otherwise they had sold out. It's a public ferry, and it's the only way without another boat to get to Maria Island. And the reason I went to Maria Island National Park was I had seen from some of the YouTube travel videos that it was a great place to see wild animals, which was really one of the main things I was doing on Tasmania, other than human animals is what I'm usually looking for there. And it was really a full ferry going over there because there's only a few ferries going over and then a few coming back. And you have to bring everything because also it's a place where, you kind of pack in, pack out, and there's no restaurants or anything over there, although there are restrooms. And so immediately when I got there and got off the ferry and was walking around, like probably within 5 minutes, I was suddenly seeing wombats. And none of my video has any sound because the wombats really, well, they do make sounds, but I've never heard them besides munching. So my videos are just me, saying I love them and stuff and saying hello to them. In this little video clip, you'll hear a crow also and the wind blowing as I'm videotaping wombats.
Love you.
Just so you know what a wombat looks like, obviously you could go to the Facebook page for In Tune to Nature and see my many photos and some videos of wombats. But they are, I'm going to say adorable a million times, but they look like they're a furry animal. I don't know, they look like they might be 20 pounds or something like that. And they're kind of really short legs, so they're squat to the ground, kind of like a beaver without a tail. Or maybe like a groundhog or something, but more kind of furry and oval shape, kind of, and just a beautiful brown color with big claws. And they're usually face down, digging and just munching. And they have good claws for digging. And they pay no attention. The ones at this part of the park pay no attention to all the humans, even though we're kind of obsessed with them. And they seem kind of docile, even though apparently some of them aren't docile, but the ones that choose to be in that area are. Like many of the mammals on Australia or Tasmania, the continent, they are marsupials, and so that means the females carry their babies in a pouch, and they actually spend some of their time maturing in the pouch. But with the wombats, it's hard to tell that they even have a pouch because they're so, they don't stand up, and so you could never really see the pouch, and they're kind of facing the ground. But I remember seeing one wombat and thinking, oh, she seems pregnant because she seemed like she had a droopy belly. Then I'm realizing, oh, she probably has a joey in her pouch. So anyway, they're really cool, and they're everywhere. Also, their square-shaped poop, yes, it is square, is also everywhere, all over the grasses of the island. But I'm also going to share some short video clips that have water in them now, because then I walked down to the beach over to the painted cliffs, which are just these geological rock formations that just have a really pretty orange and beige and yellow kind of striped coloring to them. They almost look like an above ground coral of sorts, or like a portion of like the Grand Canyon or something. And there was a lot of beautiful tide pools with ruby red little tiny anemones in them and other little interesting seaweeds or corals that I was exploring, along with a few other tourists that you'll hear in the background. These are the painted cliffs on Maria Island, Tasmania. such grandeur, but then so much in the little tide pools here. Gorgeous. Then just a few steps down the beach, I swore that I saw a stingray kind of by a clump of seaweed. And when I asked a park ranger about it, she said I probably did see one, but I was at a low angle, so it was kind of hard to see, but still I was very excited about it. The stingray, I'm not sure if you can see it. It's not leaving, actually. Then walking back, and then so I could go to the other side of the island, to the fossil cliffs area, I saw the same set of little Bennett wallabies that I had seen before, kind of over by the forest line, kind of a little bit off the trail. And so they don't make any noise, so it doesn't really work that well for the audio, but you just kind of hear my voice looking at these two little guys. And at the time, I don't know what they are, but when I asked a park ranger, she told me they were the wallabies that are native to the area. But basically, they look like small kangaroos. Hello. These are either little kangaroos or maybe pattymellons here on Maria Island. They're definitely looking at me. And would probably prefer if I left. Oh, look at their tails. Oh my gosh. Oh, he's cleaning his tail. Don't even. That's so cute. It's very necessary. Great grooming. I'm impressed. He is just keeping it so clean. Adorable. I don't know whether they're fully grown or whether they're waiting for their mom to come back. But these were the little guys I saw before, I'm pretty sure. I think they probably would like me to leave. Goodbye. I'm here at the fossil cliffs at Maria Island, Tasmania. I used to call it Maria Island, but everything seems to have a different pronunciation than I think, such as saying, if you think that you're having bad weather, it's actually bad weather. Bad weather. Bad weather. Something like that. I'll just throw in like a bad Australian accent from time to time. I'm just resting on a bench from having walked so far to the painted cliffs on one side, meandering all around, because there's wombats everywhere, which is awesome. It's not that there's a million wombats, it's just that over the vast grasslands, like looking in each direction, with beautiful ocean in the background and then mountains behind that, there's just wombats munching everywhere, the fat little furry wombats, and then a bunch of tourists kind of going up and taking pictures of them. But there, I actually reached a wombat quota, which I didn't think I would get to just within a week of being here in Tasmania, where I've seen so many wombats on Maria Island that I probably only photographed 10% of them. But every one that I see, I have told them I love them, which is, I've said that to all the geese and the birds and these little kangaroos that I saw. And I've said it to sheep and all kinds of non-humans, basically. For an example, let me just interject with a little clip of me professing my love for some local Maria Island wombats. I love you. The wombats don't really pay much attention to you. They just keep munching. So they must require a lot of grazing to keep their bodies warm. So, but with the kangaroos, whenever you see one, they notice you and they kind of hold still and just accept you, or they hop away. So they're paying more attention. The sheep also, when the few times I've stopped, they definitely notice you, and either they're interested or they're scared. So, and there's some big geese on the island that I've seen that they're like light gray with like yellow beaks, but they still look different from the geese, or the coloring of the geese that I'm seen in the United States.
Found out they're Cape Barren geese.
There was also this wild parakeet, almost big enough to be a parrot, but
He actually was a green Rosella parrot.
He was really colorful. I had never seen another animal like that. I think I can hear a raven flying above me right now. I wish you could see where I am sitting. I mean, there is just all these rocky cliffs below me with the waves splashing and blue water, kind of 180 degrees with, I probably can see Freycinet National Park off in the distance, kind of, in kind of a misty mountains far off in the distance. No one is at this Fossil Cliffs with me right now, but there were a lot of tourists that came over on the ferry. You have to get here by ferry, and there's no cars on the island or anything. This was actually the last day before they closed for 2 weeks. So now some people you can actually camp. Well, I guess it's camping on the island, but they have kind of some dorms because there's like an old penitentiary, because most of Australia has and Tasmania especially has of their colonial history, there's
they call them historic convict sites.
Keeping people prisoner, basically using this as a prison compound for the British. So there's a lot of old buildings that used to be prisons, and so there's some on Maria Island here. And so some of those have been renovated, and I think you can stay in them. So I do think it would actually be worth it. There is so much to do and see on this island. I'm really liking it, but I'm just here like for 4 hours, as much as time I could get on catching the earliest ferry and then the latest ferry back. But it's one of those places where you have to bring everything in, kind of pack in, pack out. There's no garbage cans or anything here, so whatever rubbish you bring back, and you have to have enough water and food, and so I kind of have a bag with several bags with me, and an umbrella and big jacket. But actually I took my jacket off. It's wintertime here, but today is actually in the 60s Fahrenheit. Most of the time they're talking about Celsius here, but it's in the 60s Fahrenheit. And even up here on this cliff with the breeze blowing, it's actually not too hot. I have just like a long sleeve shirt on. But I've been wearing my long johns under my pants pretty much every day, and always socks and boots. Anyway, this island it's really fantastic. And I also saw a stingray, which I was not expecting when I was down on the beach walking towards the painted cliffs. So I was walking back from there, just meandering slowly, and then I was going to take a picture of what I thought was just a pretty rock, but then I realized it was a stingray. He or she was a stingray, and I was so excited, and I was trying to take his picture through the water, but then he left, which is why I know he was an animal, because then I thought I saw him again, and I was taking tons of pictures, then I realized it was a clump of seaweed that had what looked like a tail. And because that never moved, I'm pretty sure that I did actually see a stingray, and then the seaweed was just seaweed. Not to diss the vegetation, but once you think you want to see animals around here, you kind of, you keep, everything you look at turns into an animal. Like always when I'm driving, I'm wanting to make sure I'm not going to run over anybody, but I'm also looking for wombats and kangaroos, and so I'm constantly thinking that clumps of grass or a little stump of a tree trunk is, an animal, but it's not. Anyway, so this is the second time that seaweed has looked like a sea animal to me. Like the first time it was seals, and then this time it was potentially a stingray, but I wasn't expecting to see a stingray, so that was really cool. And then all kinds of beautiful anemone too, like red, tiny red anemone looking little kind of marine life in the tidal pools over by the painted cliffs. So that was really gorgeous too. So just everywhere you look, whether you're looking down and looking real close, well, mostly when you look down, you're seeing wombat poop. But then you look up and there's all this grandeur. But if you look really closely, it's the gorgeous bark of all these trees, and the bark's always kind of peeling off, or these kind of looks like these trees are ancient. So things, whether they're far away or close up, there's just kind of so much for your senses to experience here in Australia. And speaking of the wombat poop, there's no way I'm not bringing some back accidentally on these boots, because like it's everywhere, and it, like once you get off the trail and you're walking around, you know, because this is their home, and you know, so even if I wash the boots, there's totally wombat on there. So, and you know, I'm fine with bringing their DNA back. Yeah, it's really been awesome. I just have to, I'm taking a break because I was getting tired from all the walking. There's kind of some hills and stuff around here. And there were a lot of tourists. There were a lot of tourists from various Asian countries on the ferry, although right now I'm kind of by myself. And we are in Australasia, as they sometimes call it, or Oceania is kind of what they'll call kind of the New Zealand, Australia region, which also might include Fiji and some other islands as well. But before, because yeah, I would have expected to see more tourists from Asia since we're in Asia. So today that made sense. But then, like other times on the tours that I've been in, it's always been Australians, like because it seems like Tasmania is the place where Australians, it's the down under or something. It's the place where the Australians go on vacation, and some of them seem like they want to move here, like if they're from the mainland, like they're up in Queensland or Perth. I met a guy from Perth who was doing the Overland Track hike, or another guy on the wine tour was from the Sydney area, the Blue Mountains area. So most of the time I'm actually meeting Aussies, and I have met a few Americans, but actually not that many. I mean, it's quite the hike for us to get over here, but if you do come, it's very much worth it, and you should stay for quite a long time if you can, and even spend a few nights on this island. But I'm going back when I catch the ferry, the last ferry. I better not miss it because I guess I would be staying overnight here. It's like whenever you're on vacation, nothing's ever long enough usually. Every place you stay, if it's just one night or 2 nights, you're like, oh, I wish I could stay longer. But I've got my conference on communication and environment coming up starting tomorrow afternoon, so I'm going to need to get over to Hobart. Anyway, I wish everybody listening would get a chance to be able to experience Australia and Tasmania, or just your own travel adventures where you can see wildlife at their best.
After I had rested up and I was headed back kind of over the grassland area in between this eucalyptus forest and the ocean and the cliffs, there's like a wide expanse of grass and a little walking trail, but I was off the trail. Anyway, all of a sudden, all these kangaroos in groups of 3 came hopping, like hopping across from the little forest over to the edge of the cliff where there was also kind of some vegetation. And so it was, and these were not wallabies, these were actual kangaroos, the eastern gray kangaroos. Not as big as you see on the mainland, the red kangaroos, but still bigger than the wallabies. And it was really magnificent to see them. Here you'll just hear little clips of me responding to seeing these kangaroos because, again, I don't really have any audio of the kangaroos themselves. You'll also hear the breeze and the wind sound, and then sometimes birds in the background.
Wow, I'm so busy editing my other kangaroo video, I just didn't even notice these guys jumping right out in front of me. All of a sudden, the kangaroos are kind of coming over here today on Maria Island. It's gorgeous here. Normally we just see wombats and tourists, humans. Adorable. Loving it. There's been a lot of kangaroo activity all of a sudden at like 3 o'clock on Maria Island. I like it over here right now. Here's some more coming. You seen them? They're really running. I swear I've seen like 8 kangaroos all of a sudden. They know that the tourists are about to leave, and so they're kind of getting past us over here. Because the last ferry leaves at 4:30. But a lot of the tourists have already left the island. Oh my god, here's more guys coming. There's not as many tourists because there's only 1 ferry left. And all the people who stayed overnight have to leave because the island is closed for a few weeks, so that'll really give the animals here a break.
See one more guy come in the distance. Here are some kangaroos grazing on Maria Island in Tasmania. It looks like she might have a joey. Some joeys in her pocket there. Pouch. These guys don't really seem to mind when I'm around. Most of the other guys hopped off. Just kind of walking through all the wombat poop to get back to the trail. Amazing. Man, I'm so lucky.
I'm trying to relax after a great but long day at Maria Island, and I was looking up some information about it afterwards, and I was realizing that even though I thought it was great for the wild animals that they were getting a 2-week break because there's going to be maintenance on the island, so they're closing it to human visitors except for some of the park rangers. But then now I am realizing, because I came across a news story from last year and some previous years, that last year in 2024 there was a big cull, as they call it, C-U-L-L, a killing of all kinds of wild animals that they considered overpopulated during I say summer, it's their winter in Tasmania. Let me look at the article here. This Pulse Tasmania site says over 750 animals euthanized, is the word they used, on Maria Island during week-long closure. A total of 255 Bennett's wallabies, and I saw some of those today, and 518 Tasmanian paddymmelons were culled as part of the program. Some animal meat was kept to support the Save the Tasmanian Devil program, while the rest was buried on the island. I didn't see any paddymmelons, I don't think. They're really adorable. They look like a smaller kangaroo with a really tiny head. You know, it is an island, and that is going to be always an issue, especially when there's no natural predators, I guess, although a lot of these animals are carnivorous marsupials, but there's not enough large predators, and because probably there's very few trucks except for the Park Service trucks on the island. I think that's one of the reasons the island is going to have a larger population of all these land mammals who, might overtake the grazing and all kinds of things. Because I was reading also in this book in my Triabuna barracks little it's not an Airbnb, it's a B&B that I'm staying at. There was a book about places to visit in Tasmania, and at the end they were talking about reverence for wildlife, and that over 500,000 native animals are killed on Tasmania's roads
Per year.
Basically about 30 animals every hour are killed across Tasmania on the roads, which I have noticed. Although I see a lot of animals killed on United States roads, but apparently Tasmania is has one of the most deadly road systems, or maybe they just have more wild animals than any other place in the world, or it's one of the top places where animals are run over. So since humans then are the main predators with our vehicles, if you want to put it that way, which I do want to put it that way, then perhaps on these islands where they don't have cars, or in parks where they don't have those cars, and if they don't have larger kind of animal predators, they get, their populations get out of sync with the food systems there. So then I saw that there's like a management plan with the Parks Tasmania, and it's very detailed and very good for Maria Island, and there's a public comment period. So I looked all this up, and so I'm going to publicly comment. So I'm like, even though it's my vacation, I'm sitting here after having a glass of wine and a bath. I'm like reading this management plan and looking at how to actually comment, even though I'm not Tasmanian, but I'll just send in an email anyway. But it looks like for management of wildlife in 2025, they're going to kill wombats, is what they're basically saying, because they talked about macropod management was put in place that was for like the pattymellons and the wallabies and the kangaroos. So they've killed them, but then now that when you do that with their population, the wombats actually end up benefiting kind of, and vice versa. It says there is evidence of high wombat numbers across large areas of the island with diggings, burrows, and other traces of wombats widespread. I mean, obviously there are a lot of wombats there. I did notice that. The wombats, which compete with the macropods for foraging habitat, appear to be benefiting from the macropod culls. So again, so you kill one group of species, another group of species kind of benefits, but then they get bigger in population. So basically it becomes kill one group and then start killing the other group and then kill the other group again and vice versa. That's my way of putting it. To me, it seems like it's a never-ending issue. Now, they do say management of native wildlife can be a contentious issue, particularly when overabundant wildlife is culled. However, broadening the current macropod management program to include other grazing mammals, such as wombats, would likely have advantageous outcomes for other natural values on the island. Well, that's one way of putting it, like they have to sacrifice so that there's other benefits to other animals, or it's not clear there, but it says there is potential to consider other control options such as contraceptive implants, sterilization, and translocation. But they did say that translocation for these wombats, because they're a particular kind called Bass Strait subspecies, and they don't have any mange, which some wombats in other parts of Tasmania have mange. So they're basically saying they can't move them off the island. But I was happy to hear them thinking about contraception or something like that, because at least that's a more humane way to deal with overpopulation issues. I would say introducing more natural predators and some kind of contraception is what I'm going to write them about. But I do recognize that whenever you read about invasive species or non-native species or just quote-unquote wildlife population management, especially on islands, any islands around the world, that's where it gets the most difficult, because they're stuck in this one very limited area and they cannot expand or migrate anywhere. And so populations can really get out of sync. Side note, I'm also happy to see them talking about visitor populations like me and a bunch of the hundreds of visitors that came to the island today. As humans, we're trampling all over the place, crowding around the wombats, because they're the only animals that would let us kind of get near them. Although, other side note, when I talked to one of the rangers about how docile the wombats seem to be, but they don't even seem to pay attention to you when you go up around them. She says if you get past the main areas, like the painted cliffs and the fossil cliffs, if you go past those areas, the wombats who are in the less human populated, less visited areas are more feisty. And she says she stays away from them because they can kind of come up and try to bite you, but they usually try to run away. But they're just much wilder, she said. And another guy I had met had said some wombat had come up and tried to kind of bite his shoe. I forget where he said he was, and that didn't seem to make sense to all the wombats I've seen in Cradle Mountain and then now at Maria Island. They're just so just unconcerned with humans coming around. But I mean, I thought it was good to hear that actually these wombats can be a little bit more defensive and they're not so docile because they kind of look like you could just wander right up and pick them up and start cuddling them. But they have these big claws, and I have seen them digging, and they do have teeth because they kind of look like a beaver or like a huge groundhog, but like without the big tail on the beaver in terms of what I'm thinking in North American mammals. So, okay, I'll end it for now, but I was just wanting to talk to you more about this wildlife culling because it is upsetting to me when I thought the wild animals in the park were going to get a reprieve, but now there's going to be this traumatic wombat killing probably. I don't really know what's going to happen. That's sad for me because certain animals end up with, through no fault of their own, end up getting sacrificed for the greater good. It really doesn't seem fair.
So that Monday, I traveled further down the coast, and I was on my way back to Hobart, or on my way to Hobart for my conference, but then I dipped all the way down to Port Arthur Historic Convict Site, and also there was beautiful beaches and stuff along the way, of course. And I didn't get any good audio from the convict site, but it is very impressive in terms of how it's preserved, and it's actually beautiful. All the old relics, there's even an old Catholic church for the Irish prisoners who are basically prisoners, political prisoners. And it's just another example, similar to Maria Island, of how odd it is, like a juxtaposition between having a prison for people, but also in such a beautiful site on the ocean with cliffs and these. Then they had gardens and different things. But there's a lot of sad stories about them experimenting with prisons and how to treat people, and the fact that British in the 1800s sent over boys, like as young as 9 or 10, who were probably just poor kids who were shoplifting or something, and then suddenly they're being shipped overseas on a harrowing journey, and then sometimes housed in with grown men until they ended up putting them all the boys on a separate island, which I saw. So it is kind of hard to hear not only everything that happened to the Aboriginals in the area in terms of violence or displacement and even imprisonment sometimes, but also to the probably mostly poor people from Britain who ended up in these as convicts. And then I left that site and drove on a curvy road with the sun in my eyes, kind of with one hand over my eyes and the other hand on the wheel. Of course, driving on the left-hand side of the road on these curvy roads with more oncoming traffic than I was used to, kind of heading into Hobart. Definitely turned in my rental car before I got into the city because I did not want to drive in a big city on the other side of the road. So then I was in Hobart at University of Tasmania for my conference on communication and environment, and I was there for a whole week. And luckily with my hotel room, I asked for a higher floor, and so then I got to see above the building next to me. I could see the solar panels on that building, and I could look out and actually see the whole Hobart Harbor area, and even like the mountains on the other side and all the houses that were up there, and then beautiful sunsets and sunrises as always in Tasmania. Then each morning I would just make my oatmeal in my hotel room, put on my jacket, and head over to University of Tasmania and enjoy going to all the different sessions they had there. And it was really a great group of people who were just like activists and artists and media or communication scholars, many of whom I've met over the years since I've been going to this conference. It's held every 2 years at a different university location internationally, and I've been going for a couple decades now. And so I thought I would also just share some of the things I had in my notes that were interesting concepts that you could kind of look up if you're interested in them. One is being a time rebel, being a good ancestor and working for future generations. another was the idea of decolonizing the atmosphere, which relates to the climate crisis. And there was an exercise that we were doing that asks, what do we stand to gain from addressing climate change? And like gets us in the standpoint of thinking of the positive vision for what we can gain. And conversely, you can ask people what they stand to lose because of the climate crisis, and isn't it worth saving? So what of your life plans are at risk due to the climate inaction that's happening right now in some administrations? So what are we losing of the good life? Somebody was talking also about eco villages and cohabitation as transformative identity spaces and as disenclosures or unsettlements. I thought those were just some creative terminologies. And then there was an artist who used coal ash, which is a toxin in their area, as the basis for clay pots. So that became a visible example of the toxins in their community. So that was part of a coalition of care and care-centered politics. We also talked about internatural communication with my friend Emily Pleck. So when we're talking about human and non-human communication, internatural communication, there were people talking about how they've conserved land Australia by inviting artists, holding art camps there, then just letting the artists do their thing and be creative, and then they'll take the appreciation for the area and out into the community. And so then it just naturally spreads around if you invite artists to these wild spaces. There was also recognition that other animals are already doing conservation work and they are caregiving for us. So we should have labor solidarity with them. Conservation can be seen as a collaborative becoming, not just preservation. Communication can be seen as intentional energy, which, yeah, it is. And then there was an exercise where she asked us to imagine a place, like a green place that we like, then imagine it 30 years in the future, then imagine it 300 years in the future, and then imagine it 1,000 years in the past. Then discuss with your partner. So shifting from way into the future to way into the past for a key place was really interesting to me, so I could realize this little space I'm envisioning here in Inman Park, I don't know what it looked like 1,000 years ago because I don't know enough about what Atlanta is supposed to look like, or if the Deep Dean Park or these other little parks that seem like old growth parks to me, is that what the rest of the neighborhoods look like? I don't know enough about natural history, and we're not taught enough about it for me to really know. A lot of us don't know pre-colonial history, back when this area that we now call Atlanta, the Piedmont region, the foothills of the Appalachian Mountain Range, when it was Muskogee Creek territory, when we had red wolves ranging around here. What did the terrain look like? What was the environment? I'm kind of sad that I don't know that. Then, as part of the conference, I got to meet two of their Green Party heroes and founders and leaders in Australia, major environmental political leaders. And the first was Bob Brown, because he is the central character, along with the trees, in this documentary called The Giants that was screened at University of Tasmania in this historic Royal Theatre. And then afterwards he was interviewed. Bob Brown actually was on stage and was interviewed. I didn't know anything about him, so I wanted to let you know that he was a medical doctor turned environmentalist and a senator, and he was one of the founders of the Green Party in Australia. And then he became a senator and he was the first openly gay member of the Parliament of Australia and the first openly gay leader of an Australian political party. And now he's in his early 80s. So here's just a few audio clips of Bob Brown from that event.
So our job is to encourage people to be able to make a stand, but don't ever vote for somebody who's in a party or part of a group who is destroying nature or the oceans or is not making a stand. And how can it be that 80% of Australians want native forest logging stopped, but 80% at the election just a couple of months ago voted for parties who want to accelerate it and subsidise it? It's not that we put the environment, that is the rights of our kids and our fellow creatures, above our own instant needs, that we'll get that right.
The interviewer, Dr. Claire Conkis, asked Bob Brown about how things have changed now with digital media. You don't have to lug a big camera out to the forest for your forest action. And now you have digital media and you can get it on your phone quickly to the media, but how is the media covering it? So he gives a critique of the ABC, Australian Broadcasting Company, and the mainstream media in Australia.
Has it changed for you?
Yes, in some ways it has got harder. By the way, the ABC doesn't cover those forest actions. Never. Just won't do it. So it isn't easy, but we do have information technology at hand, and I don't understand the first thing about it, but we've got wonderful people who do. And so those pictures are going out, despite the blockade there may be in mainstream media about what we're doing. And it's very frustrating for people out there to know that the mainstream media is not running the fact that they're going to straight. They'll come occasionally to court, and they'll have to come if I'm up on some charge, because it's just a chance I might get jailed or, you know. Let me tell you though, I learnt when I came out of jail and the next day went into Parliament, jail's a far friendlier place.
So you heard Bob Brown there talking about direct action and sometimes going to jail for protecting the forest. And so I got to meet another one of his colleagues and activists and Australian leaders, Christine Milne, because she spoke at our conference dinner that Thursday night, and she was also featured in that Giants documentary with Bob Brown. And she first was a member of the Tasmanian Parliament and then helped to expand the size of the Tasmanian Wilderness World Heritage Area and its protection. And then she became the first woman to lead a political party in Tasmania in 1993 and went on to become the first woman to lead the Australian Greens, the Green Party, in Australia's national parliament in 2012. I should have turned my recorder on right away when she started talking, because she's such a straight shooter. When asked immediately about how to sum up the problems for the environment, she basically said that billionaires corrupt government and media, and they control a vast communication system of delay and disinformation that halts the progress that we all need. So when she put it so bluntly like that, I was like, ooh, I need to get my audio recorder on. And so here's some of the other advice that she had. And again, I like how direct she is. You'll also hear the interviewer, Dr. Libby Lester.
Realising that the only way those in communications are going to have impact is if you undermine the system that is enabling the other side to win. That is what we have to do.
But we could do it with COVID. Why haven't we been able to do it for the environment?
A couple of things. First of all, urgency, and this is something I feel very strongly about. I am sick to death of incrementalism. I'm sick to death of small steps. We are at end game. Just as we were with COVID, when it first broke, people thought you would die if you don't actually do something about it. Whereas we now know we are beyond the tipping points on several of the global systems. We know we are in the midst of an extinction crisis. Why are we sitting around pretending that we have time for incremental change? We don't. We need system change now, and so urgency has to be there. And the second thing is we have to tell the truth. I am so, again, sick of gilding the lily because it might upset people. And yes, of course it's going to upset people. It's not a good thing to be told that the Tasmanian devil is headed to extinction. Or it's not a good thing to be told that the Atlantic circulation might collapse. No, it's not a good thing, but it's a worse thing to pretend it's not happening until it actually does. Right. So I think the reason that medical science gets people to act and environmental science doesn't is because of urgency and truthfulness about consequences. I think that is critical.
Yeah.
Then Dr. Lester asked Christine Milne about the COP conference, the Global Climate Change Conference, coming to Adelaide potentially next year. And then Christine gives a lot of pragmatic political policy and activist advice.
We're talking about bringing COP here next year. What do you reckon?
I think COP31 is a shocking idea for Australia, and I don't support it. Mainly because the whole thing is about making it an enormous business fair for renewable energy and other businesses. There is no discussion of increased ambition. The whole point of a conference of the parties to the UN Conference on Climate Change is to get action on climate change. That's an interesting idea. But you would think, reading all of the stuff about how many millions of dollars will be brought to Adelaide and how many deals will be signed up for the renewable energy industry and how many this and how many that, no talk of increased ambition. And why? Because the Australian government has no intention whatsoever of increasing ambition. 43% was their last target. People at the time said, oh, small steps, you have to compromise. Yes, it should have been 76%, but 43 is better than what it was, so we'll just go with that. No, you have to understand, I was in politics for more than 20 years. The first thing you get is that the strictest it's going to be. After that, it's going to be watered down. Absolutely, that is the way of politics. It was the same with the EPBC Act, the main legislation in Australia for environmental protection. Introduced it in 1999. It's only ever been watered down, never strengthened. It's completely not suitable for use currently, but trying to get it changed. The Premier of Western Australia just flies in and says, listen, the gas industry doesn't like it much. Oh, in that case, we'll just shove it to one side. So we are in a situation where the reason I am so resentful, I think, about the COP31 is that the Australian government is promising the Pacific that we're doing this in good faith, that we actually want to help our Pacific neighbours. We don't. We have just agreed to an extension of the North West Shelf gas, absolutely massive greenhouse gas polluting. We have done it for coal, we've done it all over the place. And so any idea that we'll have a COP here that will actually achieve anything for the environment, I think is out the window. It is just a business. It's just a business conference. I put to some of the NGOs who are busy campaigning for it, at the very least, you should make it a condition of having the COP that the government repeal all anti-protest laws. Because why wouldn't you do that? If we're going to expect 10,000 people to fly in, they'll be wanting to protest and so on. So we will end up in Australia with what they do in Russia and what they did in Cairo and what they did everywhere else, which is There'll be a state-sanctioned march through Adelaide, and that'll be lovely, and everyone will march down 3 streets in Adelaide. Anyone who tries to climb on the coal loader at Newcastle, however, might be in a different situation. So we had an opportunity across the ENGO movement to actually flex a bit of muscle, but they didn't. They didn't. They just acted as an apologist, saying how great it would be to have a mega polluting conference in Australia because of its economic contribution to GDP.
Again, that was Christine Milne, former Member of Parliament and former head of the Green Party in Australia, in June of 2025 at our Conference on Communication and Environment dinner, where I actually sat next to Dr. Hannah Morris, who I just had on my last show interviewing her about her book. And I went over and got to talk to Christine when I was getting permission to use some of the audio from this. And so I felt so honored to be able to meet some of the environmental leaders in Australia, because a lot of our media in the United States doesn't cover what happens around the world in much detail. So I was really learning through this Giants documentary and listening to Christine and Bob. I didn't know about a lot of the activism for the environment in Australia. I mean, I knew they were very active, but I learned more from meeting these people. So it's very encouraging to meet environmental activists around the world. I'll end it there for now. I do have some more edited clips I can use from Hobart and then the Great Ocean Road in the tour I took in Melbourne, which was awesome, where I did get to see some kangaroos and some koalas up in the trees. And so we'll see. You can look for that on the podcasting site if I end up doing that. But I want to thank our listeners for tuning in to In Tune to Nature on WRFG Atlanta. We're here broadcasting every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time online at wrfg.org. I record from Atlanta in the foothills of the Appalachian Mountains in the Muskogee Creek Territory and former range of the Red Wolf. You can access action items, news, and podcasts of the show's website and see my email address at wrfg.org/intunetonature. The views and opinions expressed on this show do not necessarily reflect those of WRFG, its board, staff, or volunteers. I'm one of those volunteers. I'm host Carrie Freeman, asking you to please support independent, non-commercial media like Radio Free Georgia. And remember to take care of yourself and others, including other species around the world. Thank you for listening. Cheers.
Something that I didn't hear in Tasmania was all the sounds of the cicadas and the crickets and the insects here in Atlanta. So I just got back in on July 3rd at night, picked up my dog, headed back, and loved the whole symphony of insect sounds here in Atlanta.